Touch her again and you're finished. The black stranger defended her from her abusive ex. The rain fell steadily on the parking lot of Murphy's Tavern as Skylar Bennett fumbled with her car keys, her hands shaking from both the cold October night and the confrontation she'd just escaped inside. At 28, she'd thought she was done with Garrett Walsh and his possessive behavior, but her ex-boyfriend had made it clear he wasn't ready to accept their breakup. "Skylar, get back here. We're not finished talking." Garrett's voice carried across the parking lot as he pushed through the tavern's front door, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "We have nothing to talk about, Garrett. It's over." Skylar's blonde hair whipped around her face as she turned to face him, her blue eyes flashing with a mixture of fear and determination. "It's over when I say it's over." Garrett approached with the aggressive swagger of someone who'd never been told no by a woman. "You think you can just walk away from 3 years together? 3 years of you controlling every aspect of my life. Yes, I can walk away from that." "You ungrateful." Garrett lunged forward and grabbed Skylar's wrist, twisting it hard enough to make her gasp in pain. "Let go of me. Not until you get in my truck and we go home to talk about this properly." That's when a deep voice cut through the night rain with quiet authority. "I suggest you let the lady go." Both Skylar and Garrett turned to see a tall black man approaching from the shadows near the restaurant's entrance. He moved with the confident stride of someone who'd never backed down from confrontation, his broad shoulders and athletic build obvious even in the dim parking lot lighting. "This isn't your business," Garrett snarled, tightening his grip on Skylar's wrist. "When I see a man putting his hands on a woman who's telling him to stop, it becomes my business." The stranger was clearly successful. His clothes were expensive but understated, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from genuine authority rather than false bravado. "Walk away and there won't be any problems," Garrett warned, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "You're right, walk away and there won't be problems." The stranger stepped closer, and Skylar could see he was probably in his early 30s with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "But you're the one who needs to do the walking." "Skylar belongs with me. This is between us." "Skylar belongs with whoever she chooses to be with, and right now she's choosing not to be with you." Garrett's face reddened with anger and embarrassment at being challenged, especially by a black man in front of the woman he considered his property. "You don't know what you're getting into," Garrett warned. "I know exactly what I'm getting into. The question is whether you do." There was something in the stranger's tone that made Garrett hesitate. This wasn't some random Good Samaritan. This was someone who clearly had experience handling confrontational situations. "Touch her again," the stranger said quietly, "and you're finished. Not just tonight, but finished in ways you can't even imagine." The quiet certainty in his voice was more intimidating than any shouted threat could have been. Garrett looked between the stranger and Skylar, clearly calculating his options. Whatever he saw in the stranger's expression convinced him that this wasn't a fight he wanted. "This isn't over, Skylar." Garrett released her wrist and backed toward his truck. "You think you can replace me with some?" "Finish that sentence," the stranger interrupted, "and see what happens." Garrett got in his truck and drove away, leaving Skylar rubbing her wrist and staring at the man who just rescued her from a situation that could have turned much worse. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm Skylar Bennett." "Kendrick Robinson," he replied, extending his hand. "Are you hurt?" "Just bruised, nothing serious." Skylar shook his hand, noticing the firm grip and genuine concern in his expression. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." "You have nothing to apologize for. Are you safe to drive?" "Yes, I think so." "Where's your car?" Skylar pointed to a small Honda Civic parked under one of the few working streetlights. "I'll walk you to it." As they crossed the parking lot, Skylar found herself glancing at Kendrick with curiosity and gratitude. He'd intervened in a dangerous situation without knowing anything about her or her circumstances, and he'd handled Garrett with a combination of authority and restraint that suggested he wasn't just some random bystander. "Can I ask you something?" Skylar said as they reached her car. "Sure." "What made you step in?" Most people would have pretended not to see what was happening. Most people haven't spent years watching their mother deal with men who thought they owned her. The simple, honest, Why of his answer made Skylar look at him with new understanding. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry you're going through this. How long has this been happening? The relationship lasted 3 years. The controlling behavior started about 6 months in, but I told myself it was just jealousy or stress from work. And now I realize I've been making excuses for someone who saw me as property rather than a partner. That's a difficult realization to accept, but a necessary one. As Skylar got into her car, Kendrick leaned down to the window with obvious concern. Skylar, men like your ex don't usually give up after one confrontation. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? My own apartment, but Garrett doesn't have a key anymore and I have good locks. What about friends or family who could check on you? My roommate Jenna is out of town, but I have neighbors who would hear if there was a problem. Kendrick pulled out his phone and handed it to her. Put your number in there. I want you to call me if he shows up or if you feel unsafe for any reason. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. Skylar entered her contact information, feeling both grateful for his concern and curious about this stranger who seemed genuinely invested in her safety. Kendrick, can I ask what you do for work? I'm a defense attorney. I specialize in domestic violence cases. That explains the way you handled Garrett. Experience with men who think intimidation works better than conversation. And does it usually work? Your approach, I mean. Usually, most bullies are cowards when faced with someone who won't be intimidated. As Skylar drove home to her downtown Charleston apartment, she found herself thinking about Kendrick Robinson and the calm authority he'd displayed in dealing with Garrett. She dated enough men to recognize genuine confidence versus manufactured bravado, and Kendrick had clearly been the real thing. But she was also aware that accepting help from a stranger, regardless of how grateful she was, came with complications she wasn't sure she was ready to handle. Her phone buzzed with a text message. This is Kendrick, just checking that you made it home safely. She replied, home safe, thank you again for tonight. Anytime, get some rest. As Skylar prepared for bed, she realized that for the first time in months, she felt genuinely protected rather than constantly vigilant about Garrett's unpredictable behavior. The next morning brought Skylar's first real taste of the complications that came with being defended by Kendrick Robinson. Her phone rang at 7 a.m. with a call from her coworker and friend, Madison Torres. Skylar, please tell me the story going around town about you and some black lawyer isn't true. What story? That you were at Murphy's last night with Garrett, and when things got heated, some random black guy stepped in and threatened him. Skylar felt her stomach sink. How is that story going around town already? Danny Morrison was at Murphy's and saw the whole thing. He's been telling everyone that you've moved on to dating outside your race. I'm not dating anyone. A stranger saw Garrett grabbing me and intervened to help. Skylar, you know how people in this town talk, especially when it involves black men and white women. What are they saying exactly? They're saying you left Garrett for a black lawyer, and that's why Garrett was so upset. That's completely untrue. I know that and you know that, but gossip doesn't care about truth. After ending the call, Skylar realized that Kendrick's intervention had created exactly the kind of social complications she'd been trying to avoid by ending her relationship with Garrett quietly and privately. At 10 a.m., her phone rang again, this time with a call from her supervisor at Preston Insurance, where she worked as a claims adjuster. Skylar, this is Robert Preston. I need to see you in my office as soon as you come in today. Is there a problem with my work? Just come in and we'll discuss it. When Skylar arrived at the insurance office, she found Robert Preston waiting with the kind of expression that suggested unwelcome news. Skylar, I've been hearing some concerning stories about your personal life. What stories? Stories about public confrontations and inappropriate associations that might reflect poorly on our company's reputation. Mr. Preston, my personal life doesn't affect my work performance or professional responsibilities. It does when that personal life becomes public gossip that involves our employees in situations that make clients uncomfortable. What situations specifically? Situations involving interracial relationships and public confrontations with former boyfriends. Skylar felt anger building at the obvious prejudice behind his concerns. "Mr. Preston, I'm not in an interracial relationship. A stranger helped me when my ex-boyfriend was becoming aggressive." Tease the entire story. That may be the entire story, but perception matters in business relationships. And what perception are you concerned about? The perception that our employees engage in behavior that challenges traditional community values. Traditional community values like what? Like maintaining appropriate social boundaries and avoiding situations that generate controversial gossip. Skylar realized she was being warned about her social choices based on other people's racist assumptions about what had actually happened. "Mr. Preston, are you suggesting I shouldn't accept help from people who don't look like me? I'm suggesting you be careful about associations that might affect your professional standing. And if I refuse to base my personal choices on other people's prejudices, then you might find that your professional options become limited." The threat was clear, even though it wasn't stated directly. Skylar left the meeting understanding that accepting Kendrick's help had created employment complications she hadn't anticipated. That evening, she called Kendrick to warn him about the gossip and potential consequences of their association. "Kendrick, I need to tell you about some developments." "What kind of developments?" "People are spreading stories about last night, and it's creating problems for both of us." "What kinds of problems?" "Social gossip, workplace pressure, assumptions about our relationship." "What assumptions?" "That we're dating, that I left Garrett for you, that our association is inappropriate somehow." "And how are you handling these assumptions?" "I'm trying to correct them when I can and ignore them when I can't." "What about the workplace pressure?" "My supervisor warned me about associations that might affect my professional standing." Kendrick was quiet for several moments, clearly processing the implications of what Skylar was describing. "Skylar, I'm sorry that helping you has created complications for your work and social life. You're not responsible for other people's prejudices, but I am responsible for understanding how those prejudices might affect you." "What does that mean?" "It means maybe I should step back and let you handle your situation without additional complications from our association." "Is that what you want to do?" "What I want to do and what might be best for you are two different things." "What do you want to do?" "I want to take you to dinner and continue getting to know someone who impressed me with her strength and intelligence last night." "And what do you think might be best for me?" "Honestly, I don't know. Dating a black man in Charleston comes with social challenges that you might not want to deal with while you're already managing an abusive ex-boyfriend. What if I'm willing to deal with those challenges? Then I'd like to find out if what I felt last night was just gratitude or something more substantial." "What did you feel last night?" "Attraction to someone who faced a difficult situation with courage and dignity." "I felt the same thing." "So what happens now?" "Now we decide whether we're brave enough to find out what we could build together despite whatever social pressure comes our way." "Are you brave enough?" "I'm brave enough if you are." "Then let's have dinner tomorrow night and see what develops." As they made plans to meet at a small restaurant outside Charleston's main social circles, both Skylar and Kendrick understood they were choosing to explore a relationship that would face racial prejudice, social disapproval, and potential professional consequences. But they were also discovering that sometimes the most meaningful connections began in moments of crisis and grew into something worth whatever complications they brought. The Lighthouse Cafe in nearby Somerville was exactly as Kendrick had described, small, family-owned, and far enough from Charleston's social centers to offer privacy for potentially controversial conversations. Skylar arrived first and was studying the menu when Kendrick entered wearing casual clothes that somehow made him even more attractive than he'd been the night they met. "Thank you for choosing somewhere quiet," Skylar said as he joined her at a corner booth. "I thought we might want privacy while we figure out what we're doing here." "And what are we doing here?" "Getting to know each other without the drama of parking lot confrontations and social gossip." As they ordered dinner and began talking, Skylar found herself increasingly impressed by Kendrick's intelligence, humor, and genuine interest in her thoughts and experiences. "Tell me about your work," Kendrick said. "How long have you been in insurance?" 4 years, it's not glamorous, but it's stable employment that pays well enough to support my independence. Independence seems important to you. It's everything to me. Growing up watching my mother depend on men who controlled her through financial manipulation taught me never to put myself in that position. Is that what happened with Garrett? Partly, he was subtle about it initially, offering to pay for things, suggesting I didn't need to work so much, making decisions about our social life without asking my opinion. Classic controlling behavior. I should have recognized it sooner. Recognition isn't always immediate, especially when someone is skilled at manipulation. Is that what you see in your domestic violence cases? Frequently, smart, successful women who gradually realize they've been managed rather than loved. And how do those cases usually resolve? It depends on whether the woman has support systems and resources to rebuild independently. Do I have adequate support systems and resources? Kendrick looked at her seriously. What do you think? I think I have enough financial independence and personal determination to rebuild, but I'm not sure about social support systems. What about family and friends? My parents live in North Carolina and don't really understand why I left Garrett. Most of my friends here are couples who socialized with us together. So you're essentially starting over socially. Essentially, yes. That's both liberating and challenging. What about you? Tell me about your background and work. I grew up in Atlanta, went to law school at Emory, and practiced corporate law for 5 years before switching to domestic violence and family law. What made you switch? Realizing that corporate law paid well, but didn't address problems I actually cared about solving. And domestic violence law does. Domestic violence law lets me help people rebuild their lives after situations that could have destroyed them. Like last night, but usually after months of legal proceedings and safety planning. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 2 couples who clearly recognized Kendrick and were making no attempt to hide their disapproval of seeing him with a white woman. Kendrick Robinson, one of the men, approached their table. I didn't expect to see you here. Evening, Pastor Williams, Mrs. Williams. Kendrick stood to shake hands with obvious politeness despite the interruption. And this must be the young lady we've been hearing about, Pastor Williams' wife said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. This is Skylar Bennett. Skylar, Pastor and Mrs. Williams from my church in Charleston. Nice to meet you both, Skylar replied, sensing the underlying tension. Miss Bennett, I hope you understand the unique challenges that come with dating a prominent black professional in this community, Mrs. Williams said with apparent concern. What kinds of challenges? Social expectations, cultural differences, family pressures that might not be immediately obvious. I appreciate your concern, but I think Kendrick and I can navigate whatever challenges arise. Of course, dear. Just remember that some relationships require more work than others. After the couples left, Kendrick looked apologetic. I'm sorry about that. Pastor Williams means well, but he has strong opinions about interracial relationships. What kinds of opinions? He thinks they're unnecessarily complicated and unfair to the children who result from them. And what do you think? I think love doesn't follow social convenience, and people who focus on complications instead of connections are missing the point. Have you dated interracially before? Some, but not seriously, and not with someone whose social situation was as complicated as yours currently is. Meaning you're dealing with an abusive ex, potential workplace discrimination, and social gossip all at the same time. Adding racial dynamics to that mixture might be overwhelming. What if it's not overwhelming? What if it's exactly what I need to break completely free from social expectations that kept me in a bad relationship for 3 years? Then you're braver than most people I know. Or maybe I've finally found someone worth being brave for. Their conversation was interrupted again when Skylar's phone buzzed, with a series of increasingly angry text messages from Garrett. Saw your car at that restaurant in Somerville. Really? A black guy. You think this is going to work out better than what we had? Call me, we need to talk about your new choices. This is embarrassing for both of us. End this before it gets worse. Kendrick noticed Skylar's expression change as she read the messages. Problem. Garrett is apparently having me followed. Show me. After reading the texts, Kendrick's expression grew serious. This is escalating beyond casual harassment. What do you mean? I mean having you followed and sending threatening messages about your dating choices represents a significant escalation in controlling behavior. What should I do? Document everything, avoid being alone in situations where he might confront you, and consider G. Adding a restraining order. Would a restraining order actually stop him? It would create legal consequences for future harassment and establish a pattern of behavior that police and courts take seriously. And you could help me with that process. I could help you with that process, even though it would mean more professional involvement with someone you're dating. Especially because of that, Skylar, your safety is more important than any potential professional complications. When Kendrick walked her to her car after dinner, both of them understood that their relationship was developing under pressure that would challenge most couples. Are you still willing to see where this goes? Skylar asked as they reached her Honda. I'm more interested than ever, but I want you to be realistic about what dating me might involve. What might it involve? Social disapproval, family concerns, professional complications, and additional ammunition for Garrett to use in his harassment. And what might it also involve? Partnership with someone who respects your independence, support during difficult transitions, and possibly the kind of love that's worth whatever complications it brings. I'm willing to find out if you are. I'm definitely willing to find out. When Kendrick kissed her goodnight in the restaurant parking lot, both Skylar and Kendrick realized they were beginning something that would require courage, determination, and a willingness to choose love over social convenience. But they were also discovering that the best relationships often began in difficult circumstances and grew stronger through facing challenges together rather than avoiding them separately. The next week brought a cascade of consequences from Skylar and Kendrick's growing relationship. On Tuesday morning, Skylar arrived at Preston Insurance to find Robert Preston waiting with a folder full of what appeared to be photographs and documents. Skylar, we need to have another conversation about your personal associations. What associations specifically? Your ongoing relationship with Kendrick Robinson and the way it's affecting our business relationships. Robert opened the folder to reveal photographs of Skylar and Kendrick at the Lighthouse Cafe, obviously taken without their knowledge. How did you get these? They were provided by a client who was concerned about our company's values and employee conduct. What client? That's confidential. The point is that your personal choices are creating professional complications. My personal choices are creating complications for people who have prejudices about interracial relationships. The motivation doesn't matter, the business impact does. What business impact specifically? 3 clients have expressed concerns about continuing their policies with a company whose employees engage in behavior they find inappropriate. And you consider my dating choices to be inappropriate. I consider public interracial relationships to be unnecessarily controversial in our target market demographic. Skylar felt anger building at the explicit racism underlying Robert's concerns. Are you firing me for dating a black man? I'm strongly advising you to reconsider relationships that create complications for your employment. And if I refuse to reconsider my personal relationships based on clients' racial prejudices, then you might find yourself looking for employment with a company that shares your progressive social values. The threat was clear and direct. Skylar left the meeting understanding that continuing her relationship with Kendrick would likely cost her job at Preston Insurance. That evening, she called Kendrick to update him on the escalating workplace pressure. They showed you surveillance photos of our dinner. Professional quality photographs that could only have been taken by someone who was specifically following us. That's not just inappropriate, it's potentially illegal depending on who commissioned the surveillance. Do you think Garrett is having me followed professionally? I think someone with money and connections is coordinating an effort to pressure you into ending our relationship. Someone like who? Someone who benefits from maintaining racial social boundaries and has the resources to hire private investigators. What should I do? Document everything keep records of all threats and pressure, and prepare for the possibility that this situation is going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? Harassment campaigns like this typically escalate until the target capitulates or the perpetrators face legal consequences. Meanwhile, Kendrick was dealing with his own professional complications. His law partner, David Chen, called a meeting to discuss concerns raised by several prominent clients. "Kendrick, we need to address some client concerns about your personal life." "What concerns?" "Concerns about whether your relationship ICEs affect your professional judgment and firm representation. Have there been any issues with my case management or client service?" "No, but perception matters in legal practice." "What perceptions specifically?" "Perceptions about whether your interracial dating creates distractions or complications that affect your effectiveness." "And you think those perceptions are legitimate?" "I think those perceptions affect client comfort levels and firm profitability." "So you want me to choose between my personal relationships and my professional partnerships?" "I want you to consider the broader implications of personal choices that generate controversy. What if I told you that my relationship with Skylar Bennett is the most meaningful personal connection I've experienced in years?" I'd say that personal meaning should be weighed against professional consequences. And if I decide that personal meaning outweighs professional consequences, then we'd need to discuss alternative partnership arrangements. As Kendrick left the meeting, he realized that both he and Skylar were facing employment consequences for choosing love over social convenience. That night, their situation became even more complicated when Garrett Walsh appeared at Skylar's apartment building, intoxicated and demanding to speak with her. "Skylar, I know you're up there. Come down here and talk to me like an adult." Skylar called the police and then called Kendrick, who arrived just as patrol officers were arresting Garrett for public intoxication and trespassing. "Are you okay?" Kendrick asked as they watched Garrett being placed in the police car. "Physically, yes, but he's escalating exactly the way you predicted." "What did he say when he was yelling at your window?" "That I was embarrassing myself and him with my relationship choices, that he wasn't going to let me destroy everything we'd built together." "And what did the police say?" "That unless he actually threatens violence or damages property, there's not much they can do about someone yelling in a public area. But this establishes a pattern of harassment that supports a restraining order application." "Will a restraining order actually protect me?" "It will provide legal tools for responding to future harassment and escalation." "And you'll help me file the application?" "I'll help you file the application." As they prepared the necessary paperwork over the next few days, both Skylar and Kendrick realized that their relationship was being tested by pressures that extended far beyond typical dating challenges. "Are you having second thoughts?" Skylar asked as they reviewed the restraining order documents. "About which part? Dating you, helping you legally, or dealing with social disapproval?" "Any of it, all of it." "I'm not having second thoughts about any of it, but I want to make sure you understand what we're choosing." "What are we choosing?" "We're choosing love over social approval, authenticity over convenience, and each other over everyone else's comfort levels. And you're willing to lose clients and professional relationships for those choices." "I'm willing to lose anything that requires me to compromise my values or abandon someone I care about. Even if caring about me costs you everything you've worked to build professionally. Especially then, because what I've worked to build professionally only matters if it supports the kind of life I want to live personally." "And what kind of life do you want to live?" "A life built around genuine partnership with someone who shares my values and challenges me to be better than I thought possible." "Is that what you think we could have together?" "I think we're already building that together, despite every obstacle other people can create." When Kendrick held her close that night, both Skylar and Kendrick understood they were fighting for more than just their relationship. They were fighting for the right to choose love over fear, authenticity over approval, and each other over everyone else's narrow definitions of appropriate relationships. 3 weeks after filing the restraining order against Garrett, Skylar received the call she'd been dreading. Robert Preston's voice was coldly professional as he delivered the news that would change everything. "Skylar, I need you to come in immediately. We're terminating your employment. On what grounds? Violation of company conduct policies and behavior detrimental to business relationships. What specific behavior? Your continued involvement in situations that generate negative publicity and client concerns. You're firing me for having a boyfriend. We're terminating your employment for engaging in behavior that conflicts with company values and client expectations. When Skylar arrived at the Preston insurance offices, she found not only Robert Preston waiting, but also Harold Morrison, the local businessman whose son Danny had witnessed the original confrontation at Murphy's Tavern. "Miss Bennett," Harold spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to controlling conversations. "We need to discuss your recent choices and their impact on this community." "Mr. Morrison, my personal relationships aren't subject to community approval. They are when those relationships challenge social stability and appropriate boundaries." "What boundaries specifically?" "The boundaries that have maintained peace and prosperity in this community for generations." "You mean racial boundaries?" "I mean social boundaries that recognize natural differences and prevent unnecessary conflict." Skylar felt her patience evaporating at the obvious racism disguised as concern for community welfare. "And you think my dating Kendrick Robinson creates unnecessary conflict? I think your association with him sends the wrong message about acceptable behavior and social expectations." "What message does it send?" "That young white women from good families don't need to respect traditional values or community standards. And if I refuse to break up with him to preserve your traditional values, then you'll discover that communities have ways of responding to members who reject established social norms." The threat was unmistakable. Skylar was being told to choose between her relationship and her place in Charleston society. "Mr. Morrison, are you coordinating the harassment and employment pressure I've been experiencing?" "I'm coordinating community responses to behavior that threatens social stability, including hiring private investigators to photograph my dates, including using available resources to document situations that concern community leaders. And if I choose to continue my relationship despite your community pressure, then you'll find that your opportunities in this area become increasingly limited." After being escorted from the insurance office with her personal belongings, Skylar called Kendrick with news of her termination and the explicit threats she'd received. "Harold Morrison told you directly that he's been coordinating harassment against you. He said he was coordinating community responses to my behavior. That's conspiracy to interfere with employment and possibly violation of civil rights laws. What can we do about it? Document everything, gather evidence, and consider whether you want to fight this legally or relocate to somewhere with less organized racism. Those are my only options. Those are your realistic options for dealing with systematic harassment based on racial prejudice. What would you recommend?" "I'd recommend fighting, but only if you're prepared for a long, difficult legal battle that will make current pressures seem minor. And if I'm not prepared for that battle, then we consider relocating to Atlanta or another city where interracial relationships don't generate organized community opposition." "You'd move for me." "I'd move for us, but first, I want to make sure you understand what fighting would involve." "What would fighting involve?" "Federal civil rights lawsuits, media attention, months or years of legal proceedings, and probably more harassment before things get better." "And what would moving involve?" "Starting over professionally in a new city, building new social connections, but doing it together instead of separately." That evening, as they discussed their limited options, Skylar's phone rang with an unexpected call from Emma Rodriguez, a civil rights attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center. "Ms. Bennett, I've been following your situation through legal networks, and I wanted to offer assistance." "What kind of assistance?" "Legal representation for employment discrimination and civil rights violations." "How do you know about my situation?" "Kendrick Robinson contacted us about organized harassment targeting interracial relationships in Charleston." "And you think we have a case?" "I think you have an excellent case for employment discrimination, conspiracy to interfere with civil rights, and potentially federal hate crime violations." What would that involve? Documenting the systematic nature of the harassment, gathering evidence of coordination between business leaders, and filing both state and federal lawsuits. How long would that process take? 18 months to 2 years for full resolution. And what are the chances of success? Given the evidence Kendrick has described, I'd estimate an 80% chance of favorable outcome. After ending the call, Skylar turned to Kendrick with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She thinks we have an 80% chance of winning. She thinks we have strong legal grounds for multiple types of lawsuits. And you want to fight this rather than just moving somewhere else. I want to make sure other interracial couples don't have to face the same organized harassment we've experienced. So this becomes about more than just us. This becomes about establishing legal precedent that systematic racial harassment has consequences, even if fighting means months of media attention and continued pressure. Especially then, because sometimes the most important battles are the ones that establish principles for other people facing similar situations. Are you sure this is what you want? I'm sure this is what needs to happen, but I want to make sure you're willing to be at the center of a civil rights case for the next 2 years. Skylar looked around her apartment, thinking about the job she'd lost, the community pressure she'd faced, and the systematic campaign to force her to choose between love and social acceptance. I'm willing if you are. Because Harold Morrison was right about one thing, this is about more than just our relationship. It's about whether love gets to win over hatred. And you think love should win. I think love has to win, or people like Harold Morrison will keep controlling other people's happiness through fear and intimidation. When Kendrick kissed her that night, both of them understood they were choosing to fight not just for their relationship, but for the principle that authentic love should be stronger than organized prejudice. Their battle was just beginning, but they were facing it together. 6 months later, the case of Bennett v. Morrison had attracted national media attention as one of the most significant civil rights lawsuits involving systematic harassment of interracial relationships. Emma Rodriguez had assembled a team of attorneys who'd uncovered evidence of a coordinated campaign involving multiple business leaders, private investigators, and social pressure designed to force Skylar to end her relationship with Kendrick. The evidence is overwhelming, Emma announced during a press conference on the steps of the Charleston Federal Courthouse. We have documentation of organized conspiracy to interfere with Ms. Bennett's employment, civil rights, and personal safety based solely on her choice to date outside her race. Standing beside Emma, Skylar and Kendrick faced a crowd of reporters, supporters, and protesters who'd gathered to witness the latest development in their legal battle. Ms. Bennett, called a reporter from the Charleston Post and Courier, how has this legal process affected your relationship with Mr. Robinson? It's made us stronger, Skylar replied with the confidence she'd developed over months of legal proceedings. When you face organized opposition together, you learn whether your partnership can withstand real pressure. Mr. Robinson, do you regret intervening in the original confrontation, knowing it would lead to this extensive legal battle? I regret that intervening to help someone avoid abuse created a situation requiring federal civil rights litigation, Kendrick replied. But I don't regret standing up for what's right, regardless of the consequences. The legal proceedings had revealed the extent of Harold Morrison's campaign against their relationship. Evidence presented in court showed coordinated efforts to pressure Skylar's employer to terminate her, payments to private investigators for surveillance and photography, communications between business leaders about maintaining social boundaries, attempts to influence Kendrick's law practice through client pressure, financial incentives offered to Garrett Walsh for continued harassment. This case represents more than individual discrimination, Emma explained to the media. It represents systematic efforts to maintain racial segregation through economic and social pressure. The community response had been divided but intense. Supporters of Skylar and Kendrick had organized rallies and fundraising efforts, while opponents had mounted counter-protests and social media campaigns questioning the necessity of federal intervention in local matters. We've received threats, but we've also received incredible support from people who understand that this battle affects more than just our relationship. Skylar told supporters gathered at a community church that had opened its doors to their cause. Pastor Williams, who'd initially expressed concerns about their relationship, had become one of their most vocal supporters after learning about the organized harassment campaign. Love should not require federal lawsuits to exist safely, Pastor Williams said during his Sunday sermon that had become a rallying point for civil rights supporters. When business leaders coordinate to destroy relationships based on racial prejudice, they attack the moral foundation of our entire community. The legal battle had also created unexpected professional opportunities. Kendrick had been recruited by several civil rights organizations and had joined Emma Rodriguez's practice as a partner specializing in discrimination cases. This experience has shown me that my legal career should focus on fighting systematic injustice rather than just helping individual clients, Kendrick explained during a television interview about their case. Skylar had used her unemployment to complete a master's degree in social work, funded by a scholarship from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund specifically for victims of racial discrimination. Harold Morrison thought destroying my employment would pressure me to abandon my relationship, Skylar said. Instead, it freed me to pursue education and work that's more meaningful than insurance claims processing. As the court case neared resolution, both Skylar and Kendrick had become reluctant public figures in the ongoing fight for civil rights and relationship equality. "Do you ever wish you'd just moved away instead of fighting?" a reporter asked during their final press conference before the court's decision. "Every difficult day," Skylar replied honestly. "But then I remember that our fight has helped other couples facing similar harassment, and I know we made the right choice." "What's next for you two personally?" another reporter inquired. "Marriage," Kendrick announced, surprising everyone including Skylar. "Because Skylar Bennett has proven she's someone worth fighting for, and I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with her." The proposal, delivered in front of national media as a statement of defiance against organized racism, became a viral moment that symbolized love's victory over hatred. "Yes," Skylar said simply, accepting his ring and his proposal simultaneously. "Yes to marrying you, yes to continuing our fight, yes to building a life together that proves love is stronger than fear." The wedding of Skylar Bennett and Kendrick Robinson took place in the same Charleston Community Church, where Pastor Williams had delivered his sermon about love not requiring lawsuits to exist safely. The ceremony drew attendees from across the country, including civil rights leaders, legal professionals, and dozens of interracial couples who'd been inspired by their public battle for relationship equality. 2 years ago, Kendrick stepped into a parking lot confrontation to help a stranger, Skylar said during her wedding vows. "Today, he's my partner in marriage and in the ongoing fight for civil rights. He taught me that some things are worth whatever complications they bring to your life." 2 years ago, Skylar refused to let harassment and discrimination end our relationship, Kendrick replied. "She taught me that authentic love requires courage, and that the best partnerships are tested by adversity and strengthened by standing together against injustice." The federal court case had resulted in significant monetary damages against Harold Morrison and his business associates, along with legal precedents that strengthened protections for interracial relationships throughout the Southeast. The Bennett v. Morrison decision has become a landmark case in civil rights law, Emma Rodriguez explained to the wedding guests during her reception speech. But more importantly, Skylar and Kendrick's courage has inspired dozens of couples to fight harassment rather than surrender to intimidation. The civil rights law firm of Rodriguez, Robinson and Associates had grown to 12 attorneys specializing in discrimination cases, with offices in Charleston, Atlanta, and Birmingham. Their success rate in relationship-based discrimination cases was over 90%. "We've learned that systematic harassment usually collapses when faced with organized legal resistance," Kendrick told the gathering. "Most bullies, individual or institutional, are cowards when confronted by people willing to fight back." Skylar had completed her master's degree in social work and was directing a nonprofit organization that provided legal and social services to victims of relationship-based discrimination. "Our experience taught us that facing organized opposition requires organized support," Skylar explained. We want to make sure other couples have resources and assistance that we had to find on our own. During the reception, Harold Morrison made an unexpected appearance to offer a public apology that was both genuine and legally strategic. Mrs. Robinson, Mr. Robinson, I was wrong about your relationship and wrong about the methods I used to oppose it, he said before the gathered crowd. I've learned that diversity and inclusion strengthen communities rather than threatening them. Thank you for that acknowledgement, Mr. Morrison, Skylar replied with grace that impressed everyone present. I hope other community leaders learn from your experience without requiring federal litigation to reach the same conclusions. As the evening concluded and guests departed, Skylar and Kendrick reflected on their journey from a parking lot confrontation to a nationally recognized civil rights case, to a wedding that celebrated both personal love and social progress. Any regrets about fighting instead of just moving away? Kendrick asked as they danced to their fin. Al sung. None, because our fight proved that love really can overcome organized hatred when people are willing to stand together against injustice. And what do you think we proved to other couples facing similar challenges? That authentic relationships are worth defending, that systematic harassment can be defeated through legal action, and that communities change when people refuse to accept discrimination as normal. What's next for us? More of everything we've built. Expanding the law firm, growing the nonprofit, maybe starting a family of our own. Children who grow up understanding that love doesn't recognize racial boundaries and that fighting injustice is sometimes the most important work adults can do. As they drove away from their wedding reception toward their honeymoon, both Skylar and Kendrick understood that their love story had become something larger than personal happiness. It had become proof that individual courage could create systematic change, that authentic partnerships could survive any external pressure, and that love really could triumph over organized hatred when supported by people brave enough to fight for what was right. Their story had begun with a stranger defending someone from abuse and had grown into a civil rights case that changed legal protections for interracial relationships throughout the region. Most importantly, they demonstrated that the most meaningful love stories were those where couples chose to fight together for principles that extended beyond their own happiness, creating legacy that would benefit other people facing similar challenges for generations to come.